Welcome to Teams Tuesday, a podcast about mastering the best about what other people have already figured out. Teams Tuesday focuses on insights and lessons that never expire. You will walk away from every episode with actionable insights that help you get better results and be more productive.
This was about as bizarre and easy as it gets.
The client just couldn't make up their mind.
I feel like we had top.
Went from a project of 20 weeks to just 2.
The DevOps was a cultural shift.
This is Teams Tuesday with your host, Peter Ward.
Welcome to Teams Tuesday. My name's Peter Ward. I'm the host from New York City. This is my office, which we're in the current moving, which is why the whole place is in boxes. I'm actually surprised the internet is actually still working today. We have a great speaker, Heidi Jordan. Welcome, Heidi. How are you?
Hi, good. Thanks for having me.
No problem. And you're South Dakota. And what's the time zone there, by the way?
Central
Time zone. Okay,
yes.
Very cool.
Yep.
And I understand from just looking at the notes, you're a bit of a Vegas fan and you are on the speaking circuit quite a bit with the SharePoint communities.
I am a Vegas fan, and that conference has become one of my favorites lately, the Microsoft Collab conference, because it's in Vegas a couple times a year. So
Okay.
yeah, I've been busy.
What are the attendees of that conference? How many?
Oh gosh, I would say in the thousands for sure. It's
Right,
a pretty
okay.
large conference.
Oh, okay. That's actually pretty cool, actually. You are the Power Apps person through and through, aren't you?
I am. I've been diving into Power Platform head first, really steering my career in that direction. So yes.
Okay. And I'm assuming you started off on the good old world of InfoPath and SharePoint Designer back in the day?
Yes. Yes. That's how I got my start. Yep.
All right. Okay. And what was your first job out of college? Just a bit of background on yourself.
So I actually went to school to be a math teacher. So I love problem solving. I love teaching and helping people solve problems. So right out of college, when I didn't get a teaching job, I decided to interview for a teller position at a bank. And they said, you would probably be better on our business intelligence team as a business analyst, given all your problem solving nature. So that's really what I started doing right out of college.
Right. Okay. Well, everything happens for a reason, I suppose.
Exactly.
On that. And so what year would you start using SharePoint then?
My first experience was in 2008 with version 2007.
Right. Okay. So lots of SharePoint migrations, I suspect.
I do. Yes, I've done a few over the years. My heart is really in the solution builds, though, with the Power Platform.
Okay. And what's your favorite migration tool then?
I have used Migration Manager and also ShareGate. I love the ShareGate tool that they have.
We're a big SharePoint. With the Power Apps, are you noticing third-party applications which complement Power Apps a lot, or is it all pretty self-contained?
In my experience, I've been self-contained. I actually just in the North American Collab Summit last week, we had a sponsor, Kudzu, that showed us how to take an info path and put it right into Power Apps with their products. So I'm seeing more and more of those things coming out to help users make that transition, from the info path
migration tool.
Yep.
Well, it's funny. If with InfoPath, I remember there was a very good product called Cadabra. I don't know if you remember that.
No.
So what it was, they were based in Seattle, and they had about 12 MVPs on staff, and they had a product that injected a whole bunch of functions into an InfoPath form, so it allowed you to do validation, checking, security, trimming on the form and everything. Of course, great company, great product, but of course this is a problem when you bet your entire business on a product that gets discontinued.
Unfortunately.
Okay. A little bit of a challenge on it. In terms of the projects that you see, you've been doing the SharePoint stuff for way over almost 15 years now. What do you find is the biggest mistake that holds back clients to get their results?
In SharePoint?
Yeah.
Gosh, it's such everything from we want to build these products or these solutions in SharePoint, and we really want it's just being pushed outside the box. SharePoint can't handle everything, but sometimes clients think it can, so just making it be what it's not, trying to put it in this little box, and really that's not what it's appropriate for. You really need to know the limitations of the product and whether or not SharePoint is the correct tool for the job. Yeah,
there's a little bit of that. I think with the history of SharePoint, people seem to think it can do everything and anything, like the Swiss Army knife. You hear this, and I've seen SharePoint customized out of the wahoo as a CRM tool, and I'm thinking, why aren't you using Dynamics? You've gone so far. You could and spend so much money. Why aren't you using Microsoft Dynamics?
Right. And Microsoft has recognized that, and they've really put SharePoint in the back end. I mean, actually, it is kind of just powering a lot of these tools that are now coming to the forefront with the Power Apps and Dynamics and everything.
Right. In terms of, you've done the migrations, you've done the info paths. What's your biggest train wreck SharePoint project you've seen and learned from?
Oh gosh, probably something I did myself. I think over designing an info path forms, just these massive info path forms, and then having to upgrade them to the next version, or even just relay that into Power Apps. It can be a mess.
Skyscraper forms, yes.
Yeah.
I have seen those. Yes, I've been a skyscraper man myself, actually, with these info path forms.
Yes, it's very easy to do.
Well, yes, on that. And in terms, okay, so I always ask this question: what's people's favorite M365 tool? So you're probably going to say a good Power App, Power Automate, aren't you?
I am. Yes, those are definitely my favorite tools.
Okay, and I suppose low coding solutions and everything. What are your thoughts on Viva then?
Viva. So I am definitely not experienced with it yet, but I love the direction it's going. I've built being a solution builder. I've had numerous requests for employee recognition and just weekly updates and check-ins, and I think that Viva is actually harnessing that, and that tool is really centered around some of those things that make employees' lives easier, with the cards and the dashboards and the extensions. I think that it's going to be really interesting to see where that goes. It's really pushing them beyond the work layer and really, getting into those insights of their day-to-day.
Well, and the human behavior about this is what people are doing, and this is actually what they're not doing. And also, you can see with that whole brand, they're adding in modules, and it's extending that. It's become a category in its own right, like Dynamics, with its tentacles going into everything and going into the other platforms as well.
Right.
I can definitely see that. So I am, in terms of your demo then, this is the sizzle of the Teams Tuesday here. Okay, that's the warm-up conversation. So what are you going to be showing us, and why is it so cool?
Yeah, so today I wanted to just have a conversation about approvals. I think that it's a really topic that can apply to almost anyone out there. Everyone in the organization has some sort of approval process that they need to automate. And I wanted to really help people break it down and show them that you can build this. It's not that hard. And I wanted to highlight some of the pillars of the approval process, look a little bit at the approvals, what's available out of the box. And if that doesn't work for you, how can you take it a step further, use Power Automate and bring some things into Teams? So we will highlight a little bit of Teams at the end of this, but really, I think the approvals conversation is there for everyone. So am I sharing my screen or?
Oh, yes.
Okay, perfect. So I have just a couple slides I wanted to start with. And I think that one of my favorite projects to work on is policies and procedure reviews. I work with a lot of financial institutions, and you come in and work with them, and they have all these policies and procedures that are in a file share somewhere. And it's mandated that they review these on an annual basis and prove that they reviewed it. So here are some of the questions that I always get from, that they're getting from their end users. Where is that document? Who reviewed this last? Can I remind them to review it? Does this actually need to go to committee? Does this need board approval? It's just become such a cumbersome process. It's a full-time job for some employees when it really isn't a part of their job description. So this is just a sample of what something would look like. They would generally have an Excel sheet with all these documents that need to be reviewed. And then hopefully it's as organized as this is, where we have a department, a doc owner, when was it last reviewed, when's the next one? But they're manually tracking these things in Excel and manually sending out these emails to remind people to do. They're not getting any notifications of when these approval dates are coming up. So they're missing reviews. They're also not sure, is this the current version? Is this the one that needs to be reviewed? What's the last version that we reviewed? They're just struggling to keep track of all these documents. Yep. So I like to come in and have just a conversation of, if we're going to use Power Platform to help you with this, is it actually the best choice for is it the best tool that you can use? Is there a third party, something out there that you should be using for these document reviews, or can we use Power Platform? So I just like a little 4-step process to tell people, just sit down with the end users. I think too often we go straight to, it's generally like the CTO or some C-level person that brings a consultant in, but you need to sit down with those users that are doing this every day. These are the people that are going to maintain your solutions. So you need to make sure that you get their input when you're planning out your approval process. Yep. And then, just go and talk to people about their current process. Just make them tell you what those pain points are. Because when you then architect your solution, you can really hone in on those And that's great for user adoption, because if you can solve something that they're struggling with, they're more apt to use your solution. And then the third step would be just talk to them about their ideal process. Have them tell you best case scenario, shoot for the moon. Like, if this solution can do anything, tell me what you want it to do. And then you can really start to pick out some of those things and architect your solution based on what they actually need. Lots of times users will get stuck on these exceptions, like, well, what about this and what about that? And just really, if you can accomplish and hit 90% of their goals for their solution, that should be your goal for your overall solution.
In a good world.
Yes, and then also map out the process for them. A lot of times, so if we're looking at it like a Visio, a lot of times users don't even know their own process. They're doing something and they don't know why. They're just, well, we've always done it this way. Well, if you make them take a step back and actually map this out with Visio or whiteboard it and just show them, like, this is what you're doing, here's what you're telling me we should do, and actually map it out for them. And this helps too with the Power Platform, because if you're going to bring this into Power Automate, there are limitations on how long those flow runs will run and how long approvals last. And so it really helps you to architect your solution. So for example, on here, each of the different colors are a different flow that I'm using in the background. So, and I also like to break this up by little steps, so that if you have this giant review process that requires 4 levels of approval, you can actually restart it from one step in the process if you break up your approval flows into various chunks.
I like what you've done here with the symbols as well. Like, everyone says they're a visual person, and it's almost a bit like, if that's the case, why don't we see more visual symbols in processes? So what do these symbols represent? You've got a globe. I'm assuming that's an email. What's going on here?
Yep. So this is just in Visio. There's a workflow connector. So I actually add in, I think it's like a 2010 workflow, but it still gives you some good visuals to tell them what's happening here. So the symbols don't mean, I think that the globes are actually starting the different flows, and then the colors are actually the flow that I'm going to start. So that's what the globe means, and then there's an email, to kind of help them see what's actually going to happen with that flow. Then just to talk about approvals. So an approval is actually a formal way that you can track whether someone did something or not. And it's actually a standalone application in Microsoft 365. It's not, in the past, it used to be built right into workflow and workflow task and SharePoint Designer, but this is actually a standalone thing. So you can leverage this via email. You can use it in Teams. There's an approval center, and I'm going to kind of show you all those things. But just for the purpose of the presentation, an approval is a formal thing to assign to someone to make sure that they did it. So if we want to just do a little bit of demo, just see how we actually create an approval. If we're in SharePoint here, I just have a document library, just a sample policy library. And I've got some columns for doc type, the owner, kind of what we were looking at that Excel sheet earlier. I just made a document library for it in SharePoint. So out of the box, without any prior configuring, you can do an approval right inside of here. So if I just go click on one of these and do the ellipsis, and then I go to this automate, there's a request sign off option. So I click on that. It's going to open up this tab on the side here, and then it's going to ask me who I want my approver to be. So one limitation here is that I can't choose the doc owner column. Like, I can't say, just populate whoever is in that doc owner column. I actually have to type in a name here. So I have to type in my own name. And then I could add a message to this, like, please approve.
Can you add a group in? Can you do a group?
No, I'm not sure. That is something I haven't tried in the out of the box. I generally end up building my own, so I have not tried a group. I would think that you could, though.
Yeah.
Something I'd have to test. I'm not promising anything. But I'm not going to click run. But when you do click run, it'll actually send that approver an email, which I have here. So it sends an email that looks like this. It's very basic. It says, please approve, who it was requested by, the date it was requested. There's a link to that document right there. And then you have the 2 options of approve, reject. And then this is that custom message that I would have typed in there. So when I click, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, task. Are we always working outside Microsoft tasks or to do Microsoft to do then?
Yes. In this instance, this is just strictly in approvals. Yes. There would not be any to-dos or planners or anything.
Yeah. That's a big request I get from some of the clients to say, this is all integrate in tasks and planner. And I say, no, not quite.
image yet. Not with the out of the box, probably with the custom option, which we're going to go over. But so this is, again, the limitations with this is it's the, when you do sign off on this, so this one has been signed off and it's approved. I don't know who signed off, when, I don't see what comments they put. This gives me nothing really. It tells me it's approved, but that's not going to work for an audit trail for a bank that needs to say this person signed off on this date. So that out of the box piece there doesn't really work for them. So that's when you want to introduce a Power Automate flow and do some sort of custom approval. So I'm going to come into here. I already have one created. And the other thing with those out of the box ones that I just showed is I had to go and click it manually to start it. If you wanted to do this on a schedule, that next approval date is coming up in a month, go ahead and trigger this approval and send it to that person. You would need to do an automated trigger for that. And that's only possible in Power Automate. So in this case, I'm just doing when an item is created. We're going to go ahead and create that approval. And let me show you here a little bit about. So with that approval type here, I'm going to zoom in. There's a couple different options. There's approve and reject, and then there's also the custom responses. The approve and reject will just give you approve, reject buttons at the bottom, but the custom responses allows you to add some more in. Maybe you want approve with contingencies and reject or something like that. And then there's also, everyone must respond, or you can do first to respond. So you can do, when you're assigning to a group of people, you could, make sure that everyone responds to your request there. So I'm just doing custom responses here. You can put in the title of the request. You can pull in some of that information from SharePoint too, from that document, the name of the document. I can pull in the request type, who the submitter was, the category. I can really bring in some of that. I like to keep, when I send these approvals to users, I like to keep all that information in the actual task itself or the email, because I don't want to have them have to go back out to SharePoint and see any of that information. If you have that information, you can leverage it right in your notification to them. So I've just got some basic information here, the link to the item, and then that will send them an email when I create that approval. But I think really where the power comes in is this adaptive cards and teams. So I wanted to show that here. So I created that approval piece, but this option here, this post adaptive card in chat or channel. So what this does is it allows you to create that adaptive card that you can push into a team's chat and create that actionable message right inside the chat. So here's a couple different options. You can post it as the flow bot. You can do it as a user or Power Virtual Agents. So if I want to bother people to do yearly reviews, I probably don't want to bother them as myself. I probably want to bother them as the flow bot so they can't blame me when they get harassed about it. So I generally always choose the flow bot option. You can choose to post it in a channel, the chat with the flow bot, or a group chat. I'll kind of show you here. I'm going to pop over to my teams to show you what that looks like. So in the chat option here, this is that chat with the flow bot. It says Power Automate as the user, and then this would be the adaptive card that would come through in the chat.
Right. Quick question. Is it possible when you're pushing this through to actually notify, it's one thing adding in the approval into the channel, but you can actually notify the person at Heidi. So therefore they actually get notified as they get pinged or dinged in a notification.
Yes. Yep. This one I'm pushing through as a chat. So they would get a pop-up message from that.
Okay,
if I put it in the channel, then it would just go into the channel, but then they could still get that channel notification. Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Because people just say there's just too much noise with all the chat. Everything's bold and they just don't know what they really actually look at.
Right. Yep. And I like to, when I do these too, this is a different scenario, but we use this process for employee changes, new hires, terms, leave, tracking some of those requests. And we created a team for that and then different channels for each. One channel for new hires, one channel for terms, and then we start to push those approvals to those channels. So then the people who are monitoring this can just come out here and see in the different channels, the different tasks they have. It's not just one large channel of all these various tasks. They can come out, and if maybe so-and-so is monitoring the new hires for the week and the other one's doing terms, and it really helps them keep those threaded approval types in that team, in those channels. So that's the posted in the channels. You can choose the team, which channel, and then the adaptive card. And I think that's the most intimidating part for users is this adaptive card. They think that they have to do something grand with this to design it. It builds you one right out of the gate. As soon as you build this approval up here, that adaptive card is created for you. So I'll just show you. If you just search for adaptive card, oops. So I can either enter the JSON here, or I can just search for adaptive card, and there's only one option there for me. So it's very simple. Just click that, and then you're good to go. And then that's what that adaptive card looks like. So it's got the buttons there, all the information that I put in the approval itself. And one thing to note here is that this email looks different than the adaptive card. So there are differences in how it's formatted. The adaptive cards are formatted differently than Outlook in the client and Outlook on the mobile too, as well. So you've got to be careful when you're building these solutions and choose which medium you're going to use most often, and then make sure your formatting, applies to that medium.
Right.
So that's the adaptive card piece. Pretty much covered most of it. Then once you do have these approvals out there, there's a couple things. When you're done with this and it's been approved and marked off on, you want to make sure that you push your values back to SharePoint. So in this library, we have, our document here, and then I just have a couple columns here for like department approval date, department approver, and then their comments. So at the very end of my flow, I want to make sure I push those dates back so that after they get all those reviews done, they can just export this to Excel. And then they have a nice report of all the various documents that were reviewed and the dates, etc. And then another thing too that I love to do is with the SharePoint list formatting. So in this library, I have I'm keeping track of a review status and where it's at. You'll notice that card just popped down. You can do some custom list formatting to show your users where the document is at. Like maybe they don't know what step comes before department approval, but if they hover over it, they can see it's submitted and then it goes to department and then the various steps there. So just a little bit of JSON is all this is, on the column, and you don't even have to write it. You just have to go out to GitHub and find that SharePoint list repository and you've got your code. So little things to make people's lives easier and, a little more user friendly.
Nope. It's funny. It's the little things, or like a little bit of polish. Having buttons at the bottom of the form or top of the top of the form, it just makes that user experience so much nicer.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay, on that, very cool.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the bulk of my demo.
All right. So, a quick question for you. In terms of this is all good stuff. In terms of with forms, what about the whole rejection and all that kind of stuff? Because as you know, people, I don't know, I need to reject it, kicking it back. Does that? I suppose that's a different logic form, isn't it? That's a different logic if they're going to reject it there and then.
Definitely. In that Visio that I had to, I always map out that path. And I always will just build in something that if it's ever rejected throughout it, you need to send it back to the user and they need to start the whole process over. I have gotten caught up so many times trying to, people will craft these scenarios of, well, if I reject it, then it needs to get restarted. And then it spins. These approvals are not that complex behind the scenes. It's like, so it's much easier to just cancel everything and start over.
Well, one of the things which I've often found with approvals is these edge cases that just you can spend more time on the edge cases than the real case. Yeah. And I'm sure you've experienced it with like InfoPath or like with things like with SharePoint Designer. It's a simple workflow. It's a standard workflow. Just should not be a problem. And then this thing is just grown into some kind of like a spaghetti workflow process. And it's almost a bit like, if we had known this from the beginning, we would have never done it in SharePoint. We would have had to do like a Nintex or K2 workflow engine.
Yes, and that's why it's so important to map that Visio out and make them sign off on that.
Yes.
If this, then this is what's happening, and that's what I'm going to architect for you.
Yeah, and I've often said, like, can someone explain how we started with this and how we've ended like this?
Yes. That. And there's always those one-off scenarios, like I mentioned, that, well, what if so-and-so is out of the office and this person is too, and then can we build in something for that? No.
I need a backup.
Let's just bring it back.
I need a backup approver. Because the other thing as well, my counter to a lot of what you've just said is that, okay, who is going to maintain this? Who is going to add in the backup approvers? Okay, this requires a special approval. Who's managing this? And then usually the people in the room, oh, well, we'll get back to you on this. On that.
Exactly.
Can you do this? What about this?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
On
Yep.
that.
I always keep my approvers in SharePoint. I mean, I have a department approvers list here. I always keep it out here so that, it does give the users that power. The ones that may not know how to go into Power Automate and flip or change that, if they can just come out to here and change the approver in here, and I just use this for my flow, this tends to work better.
Off coding, very smart.
Yep.
Yeah, but no, I completely agree on that. On that also note, in terms of this whole these edge cases, one of the things which I found I would always ask, I was always saying, how often does this come up? And then it comes up once every 3 or 4 months. Is it really? Do we really need it then? Okay, or what's the worst situation if this approval doesn't get done for a week? What's the worst that can happen? Okay, can somebody override it? Okay, and then oddly enough, and maybe it's just human nature, people rarely gravitate to the simple solutions. They always want to overcomplicate it.
Yes, and that's why we always build with service accounts too. We need to build with the service account. We don't ever want to tie anything to our own credentials, because then that gives the user the power to go in and reassign those referrals or cancel those referrals if it does get assigned to someone who's out on leave for 90 days and you didn't know it. That's the only person that can reassign that task, is that person who's out. So you got to have that service account out there to be able to accommodate for some of that.
That's true. In terms of the question, which I know I'm sort of picking your brains here. Quite often we've had people who, okay, we want the workflow approval on a Word document. Can you add that to say, add that as another page onto the Word document and then have the approvers that? I've seen, can that now be done with adding a document and then editing the document, or is that that's just Visual Studio custom code?
I would say that's a Visual Studio custom code kind of thing, because I know that approvals will not run if the document is open. I know I've had many of them that error because of that. So yeah, so definitely, I'm sure maybe that's coming. Who knows?
Okay. The other thing as well with SharePoint Designer, I remember this. If you uploaded a document, okay, say if you created if you uploaded a document, it will fire off the workflow before the document had actually been saved. Okay, has that, which is rather irritating, because people say, what am I approving? It's a blank document. Has that been resolved now?
Yes, because it will just error out. If the document is still, it'll say locked for editing or something. And then you can build that you can build those retry loops into your Power Automate to say that it's actually in the run after.
Right.
So if I come into here and I do configure run after, so I can say if this failed, meaning the document's still open, I can have it loop and wait 24 hours and try again the next day. And you can do a do until loop to do it until that document's checked back in. So I think that, yes, on the workflow side, that there's been enhancements for that.
Yeah, because we've had clients and they wanted to basically add tasks into planner tasks and the to-do list, and you can't do that. And even with the API won't allow it. You have to almost get it into a SharePoint list and have a flow to push it in. You can't do it from a third party app. So I'm assuming that's a security feature.
Sure. I have not done too much with that yet. I try and live in this world right here.
Okay. And how well does Flow work with OneNote?
With OneNote?
Yes.
I have not tried that either.
Right.
Is that a connector?
That's a quite good question, actually.
We look.
Okay, the reason why, because I'm seeing a lot of people using OneNote as wikis. Okay, and as a result, they want to say, you updated your wiki. Is it been approved? Okay, i.e., is it accurate, correct?
It looks like there is a connector in there, so that could be, that could be a potential.
Maybe. Okay, that's something which I might even look at tonight, actually, on that front.
Sounds like you got your work cut out for you there.
Well, I know. You have no idea. Some of the questions, but people, they've got the SharePoint. They sort of think it's sort of like it can do everything and anything, and sometimes this requires like a full-on, like even though the Power Apps, the whole Automate platform is a lot more, should we say, robust and Designer and InfoPath, okay, and it's more enterprise ready. Sometimes people just want sort of like something much more enterprise ready, and it's almost a bit like it's something like it will run out of gas, and you've got to like tell these guys or the customer where it's going to run out of gas, and ideally sooner rather than later. So that's what. But you're absolutely right. It needs to be mapped out very clearly, so they kind of like know what's happening, what's going on in their workflow process.
Yep. And it helps too when you do hand that solution over to someone who isn't a SharePoint consultant, someone that can keep up with it and be able to maintain it and to do some basic troubleshooting with those flows and see where the process went wrong and how do we restart it without restarting the whole thing over again.
Right. Okay. Very cool. All right. We'll do a quick bit of rapid fire questions. What's your best and worst tech advice you've been given?
Best advice, I think that getting a mentor has been the best thing for my career. When you work in this world, you're sometimes the only person at your organization. You've reached the ceiling. You have no one else to talk to about these things and your ideas. And I think just get a mentor and just start reaching out to people at conferences, start getting on the community calls, just take advantage of all of those free resources that the community has to offer. That's been just worked wonders for me. And worst advice, I'm really bad about saying no. I need to say no more often, protect that. It is okay to say no and to avoid burnout and how the world works these days. I think that's probably something I need to work on.
Mm-hmm. Yes, because when you say no, it also opens up another opportunity to say yes to.
Right. Yeah.
Where do you want to be doing in 5 years' time?
5 years. I'm actually starting my new job on Monday with Avanade, so I hope to still be around and making some waves there.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I'd love to continue to do speaking events, and I'm working on Microsoft MVP. I would love to be part of that community, hopefully.
All right. Yeah, you're way under the way. You're very much under the way on this. Okay, and your blind spot with the Microsoft knowledge and pitfalls.
I think security and compliance. I see that ARMA conference is happening right now in Nashville, and a lot of people out there are talking about, the labeling and retention and all that. I feel that is a whole different world that I have not really dove into yet.
Yes, DLP policies. Yes,
that kind of thing.
We've implemented that quite a bit actually in our company. Well, also now with the E5 licenses, Microsoft have got this very well done actually, and with rights management, it is, and particularly the integration into Windows 10 and Intune as well. The solution is very robust. Actually, and it's almost like you don't need our third-party products. The Microsoft stack can do it very well on that. Okay.
Yes.
Where do you source a lot of your knowledge from?
The community. I love to do. So I listen to a couple podcasts regularly. The Message Center with Daniel and Daryl, and the M365 Voice crew with Mike and Sarah and Antonio.
Okay.
There are this whole community of people that we can't stop talking about this stuff, and they want other people to listen to it. And that's really where I get a lot of my knowledge from, is those.
Okay. Now you mentioned a mentor at Microsoft. Can you mention that person's name?
Yeah, Liz Sundit. She's on the Microsoft Viva team. She's been my mentor for years now. So she's been amazing and a great driving force for me in my career.
Right. Okay. Very cool. All right. And where can we actually find you?
I'm out there on Twitter. You can find me on LinkedIn. I'm starting a blog, so hopefully to see some more content out there soon. I do a bunch of conferences, so reach out to me.
Where's your next conference?
I think Vegas in December, the Microsoft Collab Conference.
Okay. And what topic are you speaking about?
I will be doing some Power Platform sessions. The same two that I did at the Microsoft Power Platform Conference here in September.
Okay. Very cool. All right. I asked someone this question. It says, on your mind, is there any song that will describe your SharePoint would be? And a lot of people say they have no clue. You've got Every Breath You Take by The Police, which is a good song, actually.
It is. But it's just, there's, in that song, I'll be watching you, like every breath you take. Because SharePoint is everywhere. It's the back end to everything. And it's, you can't get rid of it, Right. It's always going to be there.
You kind of don't stand so close to me, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
Okay. Walking on the moon. I don't know. All right. Okay, Heidi. Thank you so much for your time. Very entertaining. This will be on Spotify and SoundCloud. We'll let you know. Okay. Enjoy the rest of the day.
Thank you so much.
Part of Teams Tuesday.